maybe mom or dad, had all this like high hopes for interaction. Maybe there was too much of an expectation of, okay, we're going to do interviews, we're going to do our guess who game, we're going to hand out the cookies you made. And there was so much that when that happened, the child felt so much expectation. So I would always be cautious, and this is where you can talk with your treatment provider. What goals or games are you working on, and when do you implement? Warm up is critical. That's not regression, that's an awareness. So, like you said, it was a party. People were coming over. All five came over at once, and maybe they looked right at her. So, one of the things I might do is educate the guests coming over. Like, these are her aunts and uncles, someone that you're probably relatively close to. She sees them, you said, often, and maybe she sees them in, I play with my cousin, and then the dad isn't even there, or he comes in later, or it's a game that she likes and she's had time to warm up. Maybe it's at their house where she feels more actually comfortable because she doesn't feel the pressure of, let's say, one of her parents acts, that's not realizing what he or she is doing. Maybe she's more comfortable at your house in a one-on-one and only cousin comes over. But now dynamics changed, right? So the dynamic changed. So what this tells me is she's not comfortable. So we can't have that, oh my gosh, you need to play your games or say hi, Uncle Bill said hello. You need to kind of like step back and realize, all right, I'm going to step back. I'm going to focus on them. I'm going to kind of let go here and give her some warm up. Maybe
Hmm.
you'll go in the kitchen with her and she'll kind of like hang out next to you for a while and just be okay with it. Parents have these, sometimes I find these expectations that they want to meet. My child regressed if she doesn't say hi, like she's failing in treatment. No, this
Hmm.
is part of it, is understanding that and looking at her body language and what is she telling you by that?
Yeah.
And what are you going to do different next time?
Hmm.
Maybe there was too much expectation. Look, we don't know the exact scenario, right?
I also think that, when it comes to like looking at a situation, as a treatment provider, for me, that's so important because that really helps me understand when to intervene or when that child might be ready for that next step. So as I'm working with them, if I'm noticing again, like their body language initially is a little bit more shut down, maybe I go into the waiting room and I introduce myself. It's the first time I'm seeing this family. I kind of am assessing a little bit. I'm looking at what are the dynamics like? How is this child interacting or lack of, right? And so then I might start to engage. And then all of a sudden, again, I'm kind of like looking around. And if I start to notice maybe the child starts to like look at me a little bit more and their gaze starts to shift, or if I notice like maybe she starts or he starts to giggle a little bit, or, maybe there's a little bit more engagement seeking, kind of like wanting to engage more, showing me something, that's a really like aha moment to say like, okay, like they're getting ready for that next step. So now, as we always say in a lot of different episodes too, we always say like don't wait, facilitate. That shows me like I'm going to facilitate something to see how she might or he might engage in that moment. But if I didn't look and kind of assess like what that child or teen or young adult was doing in that moment, it might be hard for me to know like, is this going to be a successful intervention? Like, what do I do next? So, I definitely think as a treatment provider, so I know we have some listeners that also are not just families, but also other treatment providers. I think that's also something to recognize too, is to kind of think about when is that proper moment. And a lot of times, believe it or not, our kids, teens, and young adults, they're showing us more when they're ready, more than we think. So, it's definitely something to keep in mind.
And we can't go wrong in all these scenarios with warm up. And what are the realistic expectations for when you would expect to be able to implement some of the strategies? And maybe you respect the stages on the bridge, and maybe you go down to like a high five if she's able to, and you educate through the About My Child worksheet of telling Aunt Sally and Uncle Bill, hey, when you first come in, don't address Rebecca right away. Like, kind of just come in, see us all, and just a wave hi, and don't stare down. I mean, maybe Uncle Bill came in and was like, "Hey, Becky, you're going to talk to me today." Like, I don't know what happened there, but I would imagine that if that was the scenario in that case, that's probably happening in other locations. So warm up, bridging down, that's okay. And then watching her for her comfort, smiling more, giggling more, leaving your side more. And that's when you can start bringing her in through choice, PVC, prepare visuals choices. Maybe
Right.
it's through baking she's going to make. Maybe you tell them to come sporadically to a party rather than everyone arrive at 5 o'clock. There's so many things, silent goals, as we talk about it, where we set the world up for our kids to be successful. Look, you're not going to always need to do that. You just need to do it now, and you need to do it until your child is a more consistent, confident, social, verbal communicator, or at least reaching the capacity of where they can become in their overall treatment journey. So I
Right.
think we've talked a lot about observing. And again, it's
Mhm.
not staring, listeners.
Yeah.
It's just observing and taking notes. And we often tell our families that we work with, we want you to journal. What was your child's average warm up in different settings? And for our sensitive kids, which we know the vast majority are, they need warm up. And the louder, the larger, the lots of people, the more they know the people, the expectation's higher, just
Mhm.
regardless. And the more you need to educate them on when and how to engage, and also setting up big shot roles and opportunities. Maybe it's game playing with cousin, going up to a room for a while, rather, showing her a new game or an activity, or in the kitchen, helping mom prepare a meal or handing things out, taking their coats. There's so many things we can do to help with engagement without having an expectation if they are not ready. Now,
Right.
next time, maybe the child is like all about it, goes in, opens the door, smiles, and is able to do the high buy game or the high buy copy back or the big five, whatever it is they're doing. Maybe they need to work through a roadmap, an SM roadmap, what the order of events, an action plan, sandwich question. Who's coming? What are they going to ask? The common questions. What is your answer? What can you like? You know what I mean? Like, maybe it's subtleties of getting ready for this, but not in an overbearing way. But the more you do these things,
Mhm.
the more it becomes so natural, and the more that they become more comfortable as they're making the progress. But I always say it's safer to bridge down to then bridge up than to have this huge expectation in the beginning.
Yeah.
So we talked about look. Anything else you want to talk about with look?
I don't think so. I think again, like, all these three, go together, right? So we're like look, listening, and learning. And we're gonna get into the listen and learning in a second. But I do think that we don't want to minimize the look piece. Like as Dr. E said, we're not gonna stare them down, but we also, we really do want to subtly really, start to notice some of these things. And I love the idea about journaling some of these actions or behaviors that we're noticing because I think again, we're such a big reason for our children's, teens, and young adults and adults' success. So we really want to start tapping into that. And also, the other thing I'll say too is so many times during like communicamp, we will debrief, during the 3 days that we're with families, we'll say, okay, like let's talk about a scenario that you practiced the night prior, right in between camp. And there's so many times where a parent will start talking and right away they're like, this did not go well, right? We went in, we tried to do this activity, and then it just flopped, right? And we'll dive a little bit deeper into like what happened, and we'll stop them, and I'll say, well, I actually didn't hear any failure there. If anything, I feel like that was a successful moment because you were able to really look at your child in that moment. And now you're listening to them and you're learning about like why that scenario was tough for them. So, if anything, I actually see that as a success because as parents, we are starting to look at the scenarios differently. So, there's never times where I say it's quote unquote a flop, like many parents might say, but rather what's the learning experience that we can take from this, and so that way we can go in the next time even more successful.
Yeah, there's something called kind of plan it and do it. That's when you kind of plan a scenario. We use PVC a lot, plan, prepare, use visuals and choices. They're the safest way to go. But I often say to families, like you said, if something didn't go well, is what may have been missing. What did you not do? Oh, we went into Best Buy and I needed to get new computer paper for the project. And I realized that we didn't really talk about it in the car. We didn't like role play a little where she tends to like and it helps her. I was in a rush. I was all anxious because I needed to get to my son's soccer game. And so I ran in and right away was like trying to implement the SM triangle, and my daughter just shut down. And I go, okay, so you were rushed. You didn't pre plan. You didn't create like a visual, like maybe your child will do well with like a picture of, the things you're looking at and you're looking for. You didn't ask a choice. You just said, what are we looking for? Your child didn't get a chance to role play. Like all of these key features that you've done in the past for success, you didn't do. So it's not that it was like your child regressed in treatment. It means that the supports that were needed to have a successful exposure and social communication opportunity weren't there. So now you know, don't go running into Best Buy to get the computer paper at that moment. Or if you do, just don't have an expectation. Just go in and maybe expect nothing but nonverbal. And your daughter, your son will get to the point where you won't need to do this as much, but this particular child needs that at this point in their treatment. They won't be doing it forever, probably not that long at all. But if we don't have the setups there in the beginning where the child sees themselves, hears themselves, and realizes the progress they've made and where they are, like if they're tracking themselves on the bridge and they're getting the points to do whatever in a reward system, not quote unquote for talking, but for doing the goal or the game to make the progress to start crossing the bridge that they're checking off, then they're not going to build on that. They need to be able to build on their successes. So don't see this, as you said, as a flop, but as a learning opportunity to what we need to do to check off. Maybe that parent goes, you know what? I picked her up from school and normally we have a snack because she's not the best eater in school. And I realized she never got her snack and she was really irritable in the car. And I ran into Best Buy and I did have my PVC, but at the same time, she was really irritable and fighting with her brother. And I realized, you know what? Her blood sugar was low. And normally we don't go right after school. Normally we go at a time where she wasn't overstimulated for 8 hours. Again, she'll be able to do that in the future. She's just not able to do it now in a way. Or maybe had she had her snack, she would have been different because her blood sugar would have been above. So again, we're looking, we're listening, and we're learning so that next time we can tweak, tweak, tweak. What we talk about in treatment often, as you know, it's what's been going well, what's not been going well, and how can we change this so that we can be more successful, and what's coming up this week, what's
Yeah.
coming up next week. And that's what treatment is. It's not just here are the strategies, it's tweaking and understanding when to use what strategy, when and with who, how to do it, and understand that everything's a learning experience. And as long as you're able to get that support to be able to see why was something not successful, because of course we want it to be successful, but if it's not, what can we do so that next time it is more successful?
Exactly. Yeah. It's true.
So let's, we looking and listening and then learning is what we're doing. So with all the looking, we also listened. That child you were talking about was fighting with her brother in the car. She was telling us something by what she was fighting. She was irritable. She was angry. She seemed not herself. We need to learn from that. What is she telling us by what she was doing, what she
Mhm.
was saying, and learn from that. You know what? I'm going to take the kids home. I'll just go out later and get computer paper. So, as
Mhm.
much as we are all about exposures, maybe that wasn't the right time to do an exposure.
Yeah, so I mean, I think in terms of like the listening piece, so again, we've been talking a lot about look, right? So like looking and observing the body language, right? The facial expressions, the gazing, the lack of. We also want to start to listen, as you're mentioning, to the expression that's occurring, or also just sometimes acknowledging that listening can also be a silent listen as well. So sometimes it's not just a physical listen of maybe noticing where and with whom they're communicating with. I mean, that is a part of it, right? Is to listen to maybe see who are they engaging with, observing maybe their reactions to like tones and jokes and emotional moments, right? Like, so noticing if you're listening for any aspects of increased comfort that's occurring. Also, maybe like hearing, maybe like the rhythm of their breathing or like vocal attempts, right? So, like, if you're noticing like a lot of younger kids specifically, like they'll make grunts or like they might make like animal noises, right? So, it could be a physical listen, right? Where you're listening for cues or you're listening for words that are showing you that they're building this comfort and they're coming in. But it can also be interpreting silence. And I think that's a really big piece is sometimes interpreting silence is also an aspect of listening for them. And sometimes we think of, well, if they're not engaging verbally, then they're not doing anything. But that's actually not true at all. As we're seeing the look piece, we're looking at what they're doing, but also now we're listening for what is this silence about, right? Like what's beneath the silence. So, an example could be potentially, let's say there's like a 12-year-old child who's in school, right? Let's, I don't know, call the child Jace. And maybe like Jace hasn't spoken all year in school. It's now April, right? So Jace hasn't spoken all year in school, but Jace is really participating a lot in group activities. He passes notes to his friends. He's chuckling silently, right? He's responding eagerly to notes, and trying to join games non-verbally. So in this moment, although he's silent, he was very engaged, right? He was socially aware. He was wanting to participate a lot. So in the past, maybe a teacher would say, well, nothing's going on, right? There's nothing going on. This child, I'm attempting to get this child to speak to me and to engage. But a listening moment can be, well, even though we're beyond that silence piece, right? We're kind of like beneath it. There's so much aspects that we can think about where we can listen to what the child is doing. Well, they're passing notes, they're chuckling silently, right? Like he's responding eagerly non-verbally by like wanting to like engage. And so to me, the look piece is recognizing that participation can go beyond those words, right? It can be like the actual physical component of like passing the note or like nodding or like laughing a little. But the listening piece is acknowledging that like these are active social behaviors, and I don't see it as like a withdrawal. I see it as an opportunity to now like maybe push a little bit further, obviously not creating too much increased expectation, but this child's showing you they're getting there. So we're listening for those cues, and we're starting to see like their body language is opening up more. Again, that's that look piece, but the listening piece is also like the next layer beyond that.